Hello, Rebecca. It's good to see you.
Hello, Diane.
My sister from across the ocean. And I'm happy to be talking to you again because I want to learn all about you.
Yeah.
I want to learn about Rebecca Johnson. So, if you can tell everybody, what is the thing that we have, unfortunately, we have in common, and fortunately, we have in common?
Indeed. Yeah. So we both have a MS diagnosis from the same year, 2016.
Right.
That's right, isn't it? We were both diagnosed
Yes,
roughly the same time.
absolutely.
And we both started the Carnivore Diet and we both saw massive improvements in our condition. So we both had a miraculous overcoming or I hesitate to say cure, but we've both managed to reverse our symptoms radically by starting the Carnivore Diet. So what a thing to have in common.
Right. Bad things and good things. It was 2016, you mentioned that you started getting symptoms of MS. Could you just kind of tell us the story of that?
Yeah, well, it was kind of out of the blue. I mean, a lot of people with MS have had symptoms for many years and they finally get a diagnosis. That wasn't my case. For me, it was suddenly out of the blue. I was absolutely healthy, living my best life, studying a PhD in my final year. And all of a sudden, I had what felt like what I thought was a virus. It was dizziness, nausea. It felt very much like a severe virus coming over me. And I remember driving to the supermarket and I couldn't drive. It felt like I was on a boat in a stormy sea, and I realized this is actually affecting me. I can't. And, but I didn't panic. What happened was it settled down into double vision. And I called my dad, who's a retired GP, and I mentioned it to him. And that's when his attitude changed. He started to become quite nervous because double vision can actually be indicative of something quite serious. The first thing to rule out is a brain tumor. So, of course, he was quite concerned and he encouraged me to go back to a doctor to get it checked out. And I ended up going to an eye hospital that was opposite campus where I was working and studying. And they admitted me that night for a brain scan, for a CT scan to check for a brain tumor, but happily it wasn't. But then they admitted me they kept me in for 5 more days to give me an MRI scan because unbeknownst to me, the next thing to rule out was multiple sclerosis. And they didn't rule it out, they confirmed it because I had demyelination, which I know you'll know all about. But for maybe for people who are watching who don't know what it is, it's when the immune system attacks the myelin sheathing in the brain, which is the fatty nerve fibers, fatty protective casing around the nerve fibers in the central nervous system, and that leaves lesions or scars. And that's what I had, and that's what got picked up on the MRI scan. So that was strongly indicative of multiple sclerosis. And then what happened after that was they waited about 8 months to diagnose me because they needed to make sure that it wasn't just a one-off and that there was accompanying symptoms. So I had more demyelination activity in a second MRI scan, and then my symptoms by then had set in, very severe symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, nausea, aches and pains, bladder issues. There's a whole range of symptoms that you get with MS, and I had a fair few of them. And so they diagnosed me about 8 months later and put me on treatment. So that's how it started.
So there was an 8-month wait between when they initially found the lesions when you were hospitalized, and they wanted to just make sure it was MS. So you didn't get your diagnosis till 8 months later.
Yeah, that's right. They told me that was because the medication is very expensive, so they didn't want to just put me on medication.
That's interesting.
Just in case. That's what they told me.
Yeah. So did they do any testing between that initial time that you were in the hospital and the diagnosis?
Yeah, so I had a further MRI scan, and I also had testing of my eye to determine. They assumed it was MS. They did tell me, look, we're assuming this is MS, but we're not going to officially diagnose you yet, but we're working on the basis that it is. And what we want to know is, what type of MS is it? So I had further testing on my eye to see if my eye was correcting itself. The nerve had failed. because of the immune system attacking that nerve in the brain.
Okay.
It can be any nerve. It happens to the eye. And so the nerve had failed. So that's why I had double vision. I had one eye looking in one direction and one in the other. And so I had double vision. And so what they wanted to know was, is this primary progressive? In which case it won't fix, the brain won't fix the demyelination. It won't fix the damage. You will just get progressive disability, accumulated disability. And that's primary progressive. That's the worst type of MS. That's what you don't want to have. And, or is it relapsing remitting? At that stage, that was the two options, because you can get secondary progressive later on. You can have benign MS, but that you don't know that until many, many years later. So what they were testing for was, is it primary progressive or relapsing remitting? And happily, my eyes started to show signs that it was correcting itself over the course of a few months. I was wearing corrective glasses to be able to drive while I had the double vision, and that lasted for a few months. And then gradually it started to regenerate a bit or correct itself. And that's when they said, okay, we're looking at relapsing remitting, which is good news within the context of bad news.
Right. So your vision problem was a relapse of multiple sclerosis, and then it corrected itself. So I don't know if our listeners know this, but there are different types, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, of multiple sclerosis. Someone that's diagnosed with a primary progressive multiple sclerosis just has a downturn and they just keep on going, and there's no remittance of symptoms. They just go down, which thank God you had the relapsing remitting. I also was diagnosed with relapsing remitting. I don't know, as your multiple sclerosis went on, because how many years did you have it before you tried the carnivore diet?
So I was diagnosed 2016, early 2017. I started the carnivore diet 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that's 2023. Okay. So best part of a decade. 8 years, is that right? 8 years?
8 years. So the time that you were diagnosed till 8 years later, was there an overall worsening of symptoms that occurred for you?
Certainly the first years, the first 4 or 5 years. Okay. Absolutely. It was a downhill slope.
Because I think the misconception of relapsing remitting is that you get a relapse and then you get a full remittance. And then you get a relapse and then you get a full remittance. What I found is that when you got a relapse, you got a remittance of just a little bit better. And then you got a relapse of another symptom, and that got a little bit better. But there was still this underlying set of symptoms that never really went away. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, I mean, in my understanding of it and my experience of it, there's a distinction between a relapse and your daily symptoms. So when you have, in my understanding, a relapse is when you have nerve failure somewhere in your body that renders you to some extent disabled. And aside from that, you have daily symptoms, and they can wax and wane throughout the course of your disease. And they are, apparently, my neurologist told me that they are not necessarily connected. None of the symptoms, or you can have a relapse of fatigue. So you can have a relapse of daily symptoms as well. So it's very complex. But what I understand is it's not necessarily connected to the number of lesions that you have. You can have lots of lesions and fewer symptoms and fewer relapses, and you can have fewer lesions and have lots of so they don't understand it any more than you or I do on a daily basis. It's not understood. It's not understood why it starts, why some people progress the way that they do and others don't. It's very variable, and it's very variable in terms of your daily symptoms as well, that they can wax and wane with no rhyme or reason. But what I experienced in my first few years was consistent daily symptoms that were only getting worse. My eye corrected itself. So that was in the end, that was a minor issue. It pretty much, I've got my eyesight back, and it's never, nothing's happened since. My symptoms were disabling. My daily symptoms of fatigue, cognitive fog, aches and pains, rendered me disabled, rendered me bedbound, sofa bound, using a wheelchair, you know, mobility aids, and unable to work, unable to hold conversations. And they never really, as you say, they, you know, you see sort of slight improvements maybe one day or 1 week, but then it's just back again. That's what I found. It just would go back again. And whether that was because I spent a good day being busy trying to make the best of my good day, and that sent me backwards, or what, I don't know. You just don't know. You're at the mercy of something you don't understand and you don't have any clear control over. And that's what I experienced.
So when you had a busy day and you were feeling okay, and you were feeling like, wow, I can do some things today. Maybe I can see a friend, or maybe I could, you know, go grocery shopping, or maybe I should, you know, go, I don't know, for a walk with my dogs, or walk up a mountain, because I've heard you talking about walking up a mountain, and you feel
Yeah.
okay. And then everyone around you saying, wow, Rebecca's feeling really good, you know? Tell
Yeah.
me what
Yeah.
happens the next day.
You can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
You're wiped out. And that can be the hardest part, that people don't see that side of it. It's very, I found one of the hardest things about that time was the fact that it was invisible to other people. They're by definition seeing you on a good day, because you won't see them on a bad day. So to them, everything's fine. And I lived alone, so there was nobody to vouch for me that, no, I really was disabled by this condition. People just had to take me at my word. And what I found was a lot of people don't take you at your word. And that included government agencies where I was applying for disability welfare. You know, on every level, it just felt like this invisible situation that was the worst of my life. And it made me understand how important it is to validate disability and illness, you know, to support it and make access better and validate it. You know, it's super important.
I found that on the days that you feel good, you want to feel good. You want to go out and see people. You want to go out and do things. And people don't
Yeah.
really, like you said, they don't see you on the bad days. They don't see you when you can't get out of bed, or when, for me, it was I couldn't get out of the recliner, you know, and they don't see you. So they just assume that you're doing okay. So
Yeah.
I know, and I don't know how much you want to get into it. I know you had some relationship issues where it was hard for you to connect with people. It seemed to be a pretty lonely part of your life. Do you want to say a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. I mean, it was the loneliest time of my life. It was, because, I mean, I had experienced loneliness before. It wasn't the first time, for different reasons, but this was a type of loneliness that made me feel not part of the human race, because I couldn't just go out and distract myself from my loneliness or my boredom. I was stuck within the confines of my body that was not in my control. I didn't have the strength or the ability, and I knew that if I did just push myself through it and force myself to go out, the impact would be even worse for up to a week. You know, I'd be bedbound, you know, so I knew I had to respect the limits of my body. And that was just very isolating. So that it's like you're physically not seeing people, but they're also not understanding. And if you also don't have somebody at your side, it was, yeah, it was a loneliness I struggled to describe, to be honest. And it felt like abandonment. I know I can't see it like that. I know that people wouldn't have wanted, if they'd have known what I was, I'm sure people weren't intending that. But you just get left behind by the world. The world
Right.
doesn't stop for you. It just carries
No.
on, you know, and you can't expect it to stop for you, you know. And yeah, I really, it was the hardest time of my life, definitely, like without a shadow of a doubt. And the impact on my relationships was cataclysmic. I lost most of my friends. I lost a large amount of my family. I lost my career and my professional relationships. I graduated my PhD and managed to hand it in, but then my career collapsed. And yeah, it was quite the lesson I learned.
Yeah. Life's lesson. So prior to the diagnosis, you were going to school, You were, tell me a little bit about your life before MS diagnosis, because you were living in a different
Yeah, well,
place as well. Where were you living?
I was living in Manchester in the UK, so big city, very vibrant city, big music scene, you know, and I love music. So I was living a very, very event-filled, people-filled life. My calendar was absolutely jam-packed full. I was working so hard on my PhD, and you know, a PhD is it's not just your thesis that you're working on, it's also training for academia. So you're teaching, you're attending seminars, you're giving seminars, you're doing conference presentations, you're doing journal articles, you're editing journal articles, it's crazy the amount of stuff. And lecturers use you to do their work that they don't have time to do. They're just like, the PhD students could do all of the marking for that that module, you know, and you just end up, you know, you have to learn to say no, because the more you give, the more it will take. But I was loving it. I was absolutely thriving, you know, and I was, you know, 35, 36 years old, and I finally felt like, okay, I found my niche. I found where I belong. I found my career. This is it. Like, I've been working in lots of different things all my life, but this is what I want to do. I want to be in academia. It suits me. I'm a thinker, you know, and this is somewhere where that's valued. And, you know, you can be a little bit wacky in academia because there's lots of wacky academic types, you know, and you can just be yourself. And I really loved it. And my PhD was going really well. So that was the phase of my life I was in when it happened. I mean, I've lived many different lives. I've been a traveler, you know, I've been an office worker. I've done lots of different things, but that was the life I was living when MS came along. And it was extremely exciting and extremely varied. I was booked to go and give a conference presentation in Hong Kong, which I had to cancel when I had my MS.
Oh my gosh, Rebecca.
Yeah.
So you finally found what makes you happy. And I can see it when you talk about it. I can see your face light up, and I can see that you're like totally engaged with talking about that time of your life. So just about to graduate, I was in the same place. I was just about to graduate with my master's when that happened. So I totally can relate to you. So you're at the time of your life, you've got all these plans going on. You just can imagine what your life is going to be like. And it was over. It was over with that hospital stay. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you make that switch in your brain that this is where I was going and now I'm going to go this way?
I didn't. I was in complete denial. I was absolutely in denial. This is not going to affect my career. I'm going to be one of those people who've got MS, but they're like, oh, look how awesome she is. She's still going, you know. I just didn't, until the symptoms set in, I didn't believe what they were. That's why I can kind of understand why people on the outside didn't believe what they were. You have to experience them to know. And I didn't believe that anything could stop me. I was in my stride, you know, and I was doing so well, and my PhD was amazing. And every time I did a conference presentation, it was like, they always went really well, you know. And I was just like, oh, this is it, you know. And I just couldn't let myself think this is over. And I did finish my PhD. I gave it absolutely everything I had to finish it.
That is amazing. That accomplishment that you did during the toughest time of your life. I mean, you've got to be so proud of that. Getting your PhD.
Thank you.
Yeah. And did you go to your graduation? Did you actually walk, or did you receive the diploma?
I did. I went and I got my diploma, and I got a medal because I was a scholarship student. So I had a medal, like a special medal. Yeah. But I remember stumbling because it was a hot day. It was summer. The graduations are in the summer.
Yeah.
Very hot day. And you're wearing these robes, you know, heavy robes, hot robes, and you have a heat sensitivity when you have MS. And I remember stumbling, nothing embarrassing, but I remember stumbling on the way down because we'd been sitting in this graduation hall for quite some time. There were lots of people graduating, and and the heat was just too much, and the weighty, you know, and I remember stumbling, and it was because of MS symptoms that I felt weak as I was walking down the steps. So but I you know, that didn't affect, you know, I was very happy to graduate.
I bet you no one else noticed that. It was just something that you felt that was unusual because you hadn't felt it before. This was a new thing.
Yeah.
So you got that diploma. That is
Yeah.
amazing. But right after that,
right
before that, actually, you got the diagnosis. So you were living in the UK. Then you had to move. You moved to where?
Spain.
You moved to Spain.
I got out.
What made you do that?
Well, it was a combination of things. It was kind of like the only option I had in my mind, because, well, partly because Brexit happened the same year that my MS happened, 2016. That's when Brexit was voted in. Now, Brexit is also a catastrophe. Brexit has had a terrible impact. Depending on how you look at it, there are lots of people support it. I absolutely don't. It's taken away British people's right to live and work freely in the EU, in every country in the EU. We had that right. We could move to any country in the EU, live and work there, no problem, no visa, just go and do it. Like, who votes that away? Like, I just don't understand that. So anyway, so the thing is, I'm a translator by profession. My PhD was in translation and intercultural studies. So I knew, and I was very ill, you know, worried about how am I going to make money, knowing that being isolated on the sofa with brain damage, no less, that's what it is. You know, I was losing my Spanish, and that's my bread and butter. And I knew that if I stayed in the UK in that situation, I would lose my Spanish completely. And I wasn't willing to let that happen. So I also knew that after the Brexit deadline, I wouldn't be able to move to Spain. So it kind of forced the issue. But I also realized a few other things. I realized that I had become, and a lot of people are skeptical about this. That's fine. Be skeptical. That's absolutely fine. You know, I'm not asking you to believe me, but what I experienced was that I became, not only was I heat sensitive, stress sensitive, I was also Wi-Fi sensitive. I became aware that I'd become sensitive to a lot of different things in the environment. And one of them was my mobile phone and my Wi-Fi router. And when I realized that I couldn't stay in the city. And there's a lot of toxic elements to the city as well. It wasn't just that, it was noise pollution, you know, just kind of capitalist, full-on messaging, you know, it just became very tiring. And the environment, I needed to be in nature. I started to need to be in nature. And I knew that if I was going to go and live in nature and maybe live off grid, because the other element was that I'm living in a cold country and I'm housebound and I'm not earning any money. How am I going to heat my home? Utility bills are just going through the roof, you know, and I live alone, you know, how's that going to work? The government's refusing me welfare. Like, every single thing pointed to go to Spain, where it's a sunnier country. You can live off grid in nature, up a mountain. You can practice your Spanish and not lose it. And one day, if you get well again, you might be able to get work. And you've got to do it right now because of Brexit. So I just went. I wasn't well enough to move countries, but I went anyway, because for my health, I felt that I had to, and for any chance to have a future, I felt like I had to do it. So I just left and I moved up a mountain. I went to a mountain cabin in Asturias in northern Spain, because southern Spain is too hot. So with a heat sensitivity MS, I had that left northern Spain. So that's where I went.
So that is just so amazing and so brave. And so there's like this thing about you that's like a pioneer, like, you know, just going out and changing where you live, going to a place. I mean, had you ever been there before? Is this just brand new?
I had been to a wedding in Gijón, which is in northern Spain, when I was 17. So I'd been there once, a long time
ago.
Yeah, I didn't know the area. Yeah, I didn't know.
You loved it. It was in your mind that it was nature and beautiful.
No. The wedding was in the city. We'd only done a day trip to the mountains. It wasn't that was nothing. That didn't bear on my decision at all. I just happened to have been there once in the past. No, the decision was based on its geography. There's mountains here, there's sunshine here, but not too much. That's where it's got to be. It was literally just, you know how the colonialists divided up Africa with the ruler. I was just like, right, I'm going to go to northern Spain. That's where it's going to be. It was like an intellectual decision, not an emotional. Well, it was a decision based on
everything. Yeah, you just made this decision. So when you moved up the mountain in Spain and you arrived there, what did you think? What was your first thought? If you can remember back then, like what was your thought?
I mean, I was in love with the place by the time I actually moved there, because of course I made the decision, but then I had to go property hunting. So I did visit a few times before I actually made the official move. It took me about a year to organize the move. I was in love with the place. I still am, you know, there's nowhere like it. So, and I knew it was what was right for me. I knew that being on this mountain was what I needed. I had my little dog with me and my cats. I wasn't completely alone. And I didn't think I'd ever leave. I have actually sold that mountain cabin now. I live in a different part of Asturias, but I spent 4 years in the mountain cabin, and I didn't think I'd ever leave. It was just so, so beautiful. And my body felt so much better there. Now, that wasn't the thing that fixed me to the, you know, I hadn't changed my diet at this point. Well, I had changed my diet, but I'd let it go. I'd been following a diet that didn't really change my symptoms in any way. And I'd let that go. So when I actually moved up the mountain, my diet was very bad. So I now know that was the missing piece that I hadn't addressed. But being in nature, being on the mountain, being far from this place of awful trauma that I associated with a lot of trauma, being England and the city and losing my career and all of that, and sort of just being far from that and being in this sensationally beautiful place, surrounded by this pure air, beautiful nature, warm sunshine, was quite transformative. I mean, it had to be, you know, it was quite a radical change. So, and I did gradually, the thing is, when I moved there, a few weeks after I actually made the official move, the pandemic happened.
Oh no.
Yeah. So it's just so weird.
So it seems like the world traumas and the world news is like so intertwined with your own, right? So Brexit, MS, moving to a mountain, pandemic.
Yeah.
But another way is like, it's kind of like you were set up for that period of isolation that we all needed. You were there already. You had already moved in, right? You were already probably very isolated at the time. And then we had to isolate. So you were already prepared for that.
It was like, I felt like some hand guided me, because it was all like the chain of events was so extreme that it just felt like someone said, you're going to be there for this. Go here. Do this. Because there was, I didn't see any other option. I didn't see an option. There was no option of stay in Birmingham once I realized I'd become sensitive to my environment like I was. And that option left, you know, that option, I didn't feel like that was a viable option. And then
and during the pandemic, there's stories of regeneration to the environment as well, because we were not driving, we were not going places and polluting the environment. So like a lot of the animal life came back, a lot of the plant life came back. So you were just so in tune with all that was going on. So when you were living in the mountain and this all happened, how did you feel? This is pre carnivore diet, right? You hadn't started yet.
Yeah.
Did you feel any relief?
Sorry, I'm aware that my dog's making weird noises in the background.
I don't hear it. I don't hear it.
I felt very lonely, I have to say. Like, I was glad that I was where I was. I felt blessed, miraculously blessed, actually, and privileged, because I was able to do what I did. I was able to sell a house in the UK and be able to afford to buy a mountain cabin in Spain. That was a real privilege. But I was very lonely. I mean, the pandemic just stretched out longer the loneliness that I'd already been living. And I know it did to everybody. I know I wasn't the only one to experience that. In fact, I had it good. It was very extreme in Spain because it was sort of overnight that everybody got locked down. From Friday to Monday, everybody was locked down, and a lot of people, and there was you weren't allowed to leave your home for anything really, just to go to the pharmacy or to go to the supermarket. You couldn't even, in the UK, they had like an hour's exercise. They couldn't even do that in Spain. And a lot of people in Spain live in flats, apartments. So they were just stuck in their apartments. Some people don't have balconies, they were just stuck in their little, I had the freedom to explore the mountain. Yes. And there were no Guardia Civil there to tell me I couldn't, and no danger that I'd be infecting anyone or being infected. It was just, I was completely free. So I felt incredibly blessed. I couldn't not, given the circumstances, but it just carried on. That the lockdown I'd had in my body just carried on for another 2 years, basically. And I therefore didn't integrate very quickly into Spanish society. Also, I think Spain, I was new to the country. I didn't know anybody. And then my sort of first impressions of it were of a stressful, stressful in a bureaucratic sense, but more to the point, stressed. People were stressed, but they were stressed because of the pandemic.
They were stressed everywhere.
Absolutely.
Everywhere.
So it wasn't like I moved there and it was like, oh, we'll go out and meet people in bars, go out and, terraces, drinking in the sunny evenings. No, it wasn't like that.
And it would have been if it weren't for the pandemic. The mindset of I'm going to go to Spain. I'm going to practice the language that I learned so well. I'm going to go to cafes and bars and talk to people and meet new people. And then to end up like that, and then feeling like you felt, because you didn't feel like going out as well, right?
Yeah. It was a struggle to go out. Yeah, definitely. Especially going up and down the mountain. It wasn't actually that straightforward. I had to change cars. I had to go down in my 4x4, change into my road car.
No, sir. Really? You had 2 cars because you had one that was mountain ready.
Yeah.
And then when you came down, you had to switch cars and have a road ready car.
Yeah. Because the 4x4 that I had was a heap of junk. It wasn't roadworthy, to be honest. And then the little car that I had was my car from the UK that I brought over with me. My little reliable little Toyota Yaris, that I've had for years. So I just had this system where I would go down the mountain in the crappy 4x4 and change into my little, and it was always just a bit of a hassle. And if I brought my dogs, it was even more of a hassle. And if I was going to the supermarket and there was shopping and everything, it was a hassle. Everything was a hassle. So it just wasn't conducive. That's why I don't mind that I've left the mountain, because I've moved to a place now where it's a lot easier to just go into town and meet people.
Right.
There's pros and cons to being on a mountain. There's reasons why people don't live on mountains. They're not very accessible. They're wonderful, but they're not very accessible. So, I do sometimes think, why did I sell the cabin? Why did I leave that spectacular place, that unique place that I lived? And then I remind myself I moved because I got my health back, and I don't need to live in a place like that anymore. And
it served its purpose. It served its purpose for you, and it was time to go.
Yeah.
So when did you move where you are now?
Oh, well, I first moved to Galicia. You see, now I didn't leave the mountain in very good circumstances. I got into a relationship that was very destructive. And it's just so many bad stories. I am in a good place now. It is all coming together. But I think the impact of my illness, it went beyond just being physically ill. I had, a lot of trauma to work through, and my boundaries were down, and I became very vulnerable. And then moving abroad, it was wonderful. It was great for my health, but I didn't know anybody and I was very lonely, so it did all have there's a lot that's had to be worked through and had to play out before I could find a place of stability and strength. And it all starts with your health. But I found that just getting the health back, I had to still play out these stories of after I got into the relationship before I started the carnivore diet. And
I was just going to ask you that question. I was going to ask you the question is like, where did the carnivore diet fall into place? Was it, so you met somebody and developed a relationship and then you went on the carnivore diet?
Halfway through the relationship, I started it. And to be honest, the relationship was that destructive, it was that toxic, that if I hadn't been on the carnivore diet, I don't know what the outcome of it would have been. Like, it was bad anyway. But at least I had my health. That's what kept me going. At least that's what kept me thinking, well, there's something to keep going for, because it nearly finished me off to have that experience after all the things that had come before. And I left the mountain because of all the drama that got started with the ex. And one day I'll look back on it all and laugh. And I moved to Galicia, which is also in northern Spain. It's another area of northern Spain. And I spent a year there just to get away from all the drama and to decompress and to just have all that play out. And then I realized I miss Asturias. I miss the mountains very much. Like, I need to be near the mountains, if not on a mountain. But
you can visit the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, I could if I wanted to. I find it a bit painful. I tend to, I always wave at it when I go past it, but I don't think I'll go up there. No, part of me always thinks, should I have sold the cabin, and therefore going to the cabin might make me feel, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine.
So Rebecca, I just want to point out, okay, so what I know about the carnivore diet is that when we follow eating a fatty meat diet and we avoid all the toxic plants and all the things that poison our brain and body, not only do we feel like amazing physically, but we feel amazing mentally. Brain fog lifts. And when you have a disease that affects your brain, of course, that's part of the physical. But there's also a piece of it that you feel like a superhuman, but you feel like you can think better. You feel you can reason better, like relationships become better. And I'm just noticing how you weren't following the carnivore diet and got into this unfortunate relationship and went on the carnivore diet and then found the courage and the wherewithal to get rid of them, to get that out of your life, because it no longer fit with you, no longer fit with your mindset, your lifestyle, the way that you felt about yourself had elevated. So you wanted to be treated better. I don't know a lot about what happened, only what you've shared, only a little bit of what you shared. I haven't watched everything, but I just know that it's all connected, mind, body, spirit, right? So when your body feels better, your mind feels better, and your thinking is clearer and you feel better. I mean, did you feel like you felt better about yourself, like in your own skin? Or was it only after you said bye-bye that you started to feel better? Because I see this transition in you.
I felt better. I felt better. And he noticed that I was better, right? Like that dragged out the relationship a bit longer, because I did become stronger. I did become better on various different levels. I had more energy. I looked a little bit better. I mean, but I felt like I looked a bit better, as in I'd lost a bit of weight and I just had my energy about me and my wits about me, and that confidence was obvious. So, but then as you rightly point out, it also gave me the strength to say, wait, this is not what I deserve. This is not what I need. This has to end. You have to leave. Right. This ends now, right. And I am now surrounded by much better relationships, because the energy that you put out is what you attract.
Exactly.
The carnivore diet's given me that. Like, I don't have relationship problems. I have a good community around me. I have good friends around me. My life has not got any drama in it, you know, right now. And it's crazy looking back on it all. Like, it is like from the moment of diagnosis through to moving to Spain, through to the pandemic, the freaking relationship, all of it is like, what? It's just a big adventure, isn't it? At the end of the day, when you come out the other end and you're still there, you're still fighting, I'm still searching for, I don't know what, but I'm searching for, maybe, I don't know, maybe a partner, you know, I'm still single. You know, there's things that I would still search for, but at the same time, I found myself again.
Right.
And there's nothing more important.
So you made changes in yourself
Yeah.
so that when you meet the partner, they'll be attracted to you.
Yeah.
Because they probably wouldn't be, the person that you wanted probably wouldn't be attracted to you back then.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now they would be. So that is just an amazing thing. I mean, to see just in the little bit that I've seen, you know, when you started on YouTube and how you've grown, to me, it's really amazing. It's something that I see, and I definitely want to give you credit for that, because that's all you. You did all of that. You know, you've done that. You've you found out like what you put in your body, where you live, it makes a huge difference to who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then on top of that, the tough part that I think a lot of people in this community are just finding out now, because it is brand new. On top of that, once you get rid of the crappy food, maybe get rid of the crappy guy, get rid of the crappy house or the environment, you're kind of purging, and you're eating the food that you're meant to eat. Then you got to go through your mind. You've got to go through, you know, all the stuff that you've been conditioned to think and to feel, to behave, to believe, and you've got to sort through all of that.
Yeah.
And you've got to say, well, this kind of goes with what I believe, but this, you know, I really don't think that anymore. And you've got to kind of like go through it all.
Yeah.
And it's very, very valuable. And I can see that you've done that, you know, and that brings me to like how I worked with people as a mental health therapist. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what you are thinking related to what you're feeling, how you're believing, and how you're behaving. Those four things kind of all join together, and it's very powerful. And it sounds like you've done a lot of that already.
I mean, it's an ongoing journey, isn't it? You know, and yeah, I never, ever, ever would have imagined that I would be where I am now at the beginning of this journey, you know, and I mean that in every way, as you say, cognitively, physically, geographically, all of it. Like, it's all been absolutely crazy, and it is a lot to process, and a lot of rewiring and constant. But I do also think that that's what's incumbent upon us as human beings. You know, we have a lot to always to process and to experience, and that goes on through our lives. Who knows why? But that's our lot. You know, we're thinking conscious beings, and life is a mystery. And I think if you approach it as a mystery and as an adventure, then that can be a way of accepting things that go against your existing beliefs, if that makes sense.
Kind of being open to the process.
Yeah, having the humility to kind of learn things as you go, and not assume that you already know. I think, you know, I think that's really important. And I learned that during my PhD as well. I feel like my PhD kind of set me up for this particular journey as well, because it taught me to take a step back and keep an open mind, and keep a critical but open mind. And that's what I've put into practice throughout this journey. And it's led me to get my health back. Because
that's amazing.
I could have easily dismissed the carnivore diet. It was just something on YouTube.
I want to talk about that. Like, you started on YouTube. Do you remember whose channel it was? Do you remember who was there?
Kelly Hogan.
Kelly Hogan. I love her.
Yeah.
I love her. So you saw her,
Mm.
and what was the thing that kind of said, oh, I think I might want to try this thing?
Well, I didn't immediately have that thought. I just thought that her story was really shockingly in a shocking in a good way. You know,
Right.
I thought, my God, because I believe her doctor is the one who encouraged her.
Yes.
To go carnivore and not just eat meat but cut out everything else. And I remember commenting to a friend of mine, I just heard this story. It was an interview. I just heard an interview on YouTube like that. That's so weird. And I think you've done sort of the steps of the carnivore diet where the first step is you think it's crazy, you know.
Carnivore is crazy. Yeah.
I totally had that reaction, but
I think everyone has.
Yeah, because it does sound crazy, but I didn't reject it. What happened was, it just stuck in my mind. You know, I don't remember then which interviews I subsequently saw, but what I remember is that YouTube kept suggesting new carnivore material because I'd watched that one interview. And what I remember was that everybody looked really healthy and sounded, you know, really upbeat and full of energy, and they just looked great, you know. And I just that was what was the drip feed of, you know, wow, all these carnivores. And the more you see of people doing it and experiencing good benefits, the more it becomes less crazy and more of a thing people are doing.
So you were in the spinning circle. You were spinning. Carnivore's crazy. Oh, that person looks great.
Yeah.
No, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that person cured whatever. You know, just going back and forth.
But I didn't start it thinking it would cure my MS.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. I've had the experience of, experience, and from that experience, I've started looking into why it worked. I've worked backwards into how it might have helped my MS, like having had it help.
Do you know what day you started it? Did you mark that day?
I did my first ever video a week after I started. And my first ever carnivore video is 1 week carnivore.
Okay.
I believe I uploaded that video on the 3rd of June. So I'm basically 2 years carnivore.
2 years.
Yeah, pretty much exactly.
Wow.
Like, probably literally a week. It's probably, I'd literally done it 2 years ago, pretty much to the day.
So, okay. A week after you started, you felt what? Did you feel anything?
I didn't do it properly because I didn't research it beforehand. It was on a whim. And I honestly thought that you could drink fruit juice on the carnivore diet. So
you didn't get the full story.
Yeah, I just went to the supermarket, bought loads of meat, and I brought loads of smoothies as well. I was like, wicked, that's great. I'll just have my smoothies. And then I was like, oh, actually, I don't think this is how it goes. So I did, and I bought some frozen peas, I remember as well. So I kind of didn't, I just kind of switched to a meat heavy diet for that week. But then I started, it was on starting it that I started learning more about it and realizing how to do it properly. And
well, you know, it probably wasn't bad to do it that way. It was probably you were more keto-ish and then kind of went gradual to carnivore.
Yeah, maybe. I also went to Morocco a week or so after that. So that was, I did stick to it in Morocco, but I think that, you know, you can't really avoid things like seed oils when you're eating in restaurants and things like that. And I might have had vegetables. I can't remember, but I stuck to it as much as possible. But within a couple of weeks of starting the diet, I was different. I was a different person, cognitively and physically. I lost all my bloating. I was really carb heavy before I started it because I'd just stopped adhering to a diet and just was going to whatever was the most convenient, frozen pizzas, pasta, you name it, like, you know, just toast, you know. I was very carb heavy because I was living on the mountain and everything was a hassle.
Right.
And I was bloating up because I'd hit 40 by that point and my diet was starting to show. And I've never had a weight problem, but I wanted to stay somebody who didn't have a weight problem.
So you initially did the carnivore diet for weight issues?
No.
Or health issues? Health?
I don't know why I started it. I couldn't tell
That's
you.
funny.
I just decided to do it. I wanted to be my best self, I think, and everyone looked great on the diet and felt great. So I just was like, oh, I'll just try. I didn't have a huge weight problem. I just bloated. Maybe that was feeding into it a bit. But what I noticed was within a couple of weeks, oh, I was great. I was super, super slim again, back where I was when I was in my early 20s, and feeling amazing. Like just, and my memory improved. My ability to hold conversations improved.
Do you remember how far into it when your memory improved? Did you keep track?
A couple of weeks. By the time I went to Morocco,
okay,
my partner noticed your memory's improved. He noticed.
Wow.
My memory was terrible, absolutely terrible, and my anxiety levels went down as well. Like I was a terrible passenger seat driver. Just like especially because the car we were driving was a British car, not in the UK, so you're on the wrong side. You're in the it's like left-hand drive, right-hand drive, and we'd gone on a road trip and my anxiety levels were through the roof because I was in the driving seat position but without the steering wheel, and he was driving, and I would just be freaking out the whole time. And then when I went to Morocco, it was the same situation, but I was just cruising along, and I didn't have extreme anxiety, and he noticed that as well. So it was corroborated by my partner at the time.
Yes.
These changes.
So do you have a list of symptoms that left you?
Brain fog, memory issues, fatigue. This isn't the symptom that left me, but I got my core strength back. I think they're the main ones, but they're pretty big ones.
Leg strength overall, because no one would know if they saw you walking that you used to be in a wheelchair.
No way. No, they would not.
You have strength. So today, the things that you do on a daily basis, I mean, you have chickens, you have animals. What does your day consist of?
Well, right now I'm out of action because I've got a broken toe.
Oh.
And I've had it for 2 months, so I couldn't. It's been a while since I've been in my day, but before the toe happened, I was super busy. I was out and about. I was doing yoga. I'm going to stop the yoga because I think that's how I broke my toe.
Could be just hyperextending it. Yeah,
and maintaining it. It was very high energy yoga, vinyasa yoga, which is actually way beyond my level. It was an achievement just to participate in that class and not have anyone notice that I wasn't physically able.
Was it heated yoga?
No, it
wasn't heated.
Vinyasa, which is like flow yoga, but just
yoga.
He's really, really good at it, except me. And I'm the one that's like, she's like, oh, everyone turn to the right, and I'll turn to the left, because it's all Spanish as well. It's Spanish. I'm the dunce in the class, but no one knew that I used to be in a wheelchair. Like I just looked like somebody who was a beginner rather than somebody who used to be in a wheelchair that was now participating. Like I didn't tell anybody. I think it came up in conversation in one of the final classes that I went to before the toe thing happened. It just came up in conversation. Oh, actually, I used to be in a wheelchair, and they were like, "What?" Like they just thought I was a beginner who was crap at yoga. And they saw me as somebody who was actually, something a lot more was going on than just that. So that was quite validating. But I didn't feel the need to tell them because I didn't feel like I just looked like I was somebody who was a beginner. I didn't look like anybody who was worse than that, or struggling more than that. I looked physically able. I just wasn't able to do crazy poses, but when I was there, I did handstands up against the wall and stuff. I did do like stuff that I would never have been able to do when I was really ill. And I'm going to start swimming. So to answer the question, before I broke my toe and everything went wrong again, I was busy. I was teaching English a few times a week, doing yoga, and just going out walking my dog. Like what strikes me about the way that I live my life now, before I broke my toe, is how active it is, and that I've got a full diary again, and that I'm earning money again, my own money. And I'm having to reference my calendar all the time, which that I did not need to do when I was sick. I would have loved to have been living that life when I was sick. I missed that type of life where you're having to fit things into a calendar. and wake up in the morning and think, what do I have to do today? Oh, I've got all these things to do today. Or the night before, make sure what time do I have to get up so that I do all these, I'm just busy again. I'm living a life again, and I'm socializing, and that's gone out the window since I broke my toe, although I'm still teaching English, but that's nothing to do with the carnivore diet. That's nothing to do with MS or the carnivore diet. That's just
it's just a broken toe.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? It's going to heal.
Yeah.
It's like a temporary thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to heal itself. And, and it's possibly, it happened. I kind of have the belief that everything happens for a reason, and perhaps for you to look at that and say, wow, yes, my life has been so busy.
Yeah.
And, thank God it's been so busy. And now I can look at that and I can rebuild it again once the toe starts to heal.
Yeah.
So
and appreciate, because it reminds you,
right, grateful.
You forget what things used to be like so quickly, and I got my health back, and I've forgotten what it was. I haven't completely forgotten. I'll never forget how awful it was, but you also just take for granted to some extent whatever situation you're in the moment. And so this toe thing has reminded me, wow, this is what the way I used to be. But like, when it used to be like this, I didn't think it was ever going to end. Whereas this, I know, will heal. And that makes it different. That makes you experience it in a different way. Like when you think this is it, this is my life. When I was back in England before I moved to Spain, and I was just completely housebound, and I didn't know that I would be in this position years later. I had no idea.
There's no end in sight, because they don't give you hope.
No, they
There's
don't.
no hope to get over this thing. If people don't know, MS is not a curable disease. This is a progressive brain spinal cord disorder that gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And to have two women here, both of which are nearly 100% healed of the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. I don't say I'm healed from multiple sclerosis because they don't tell me I'm healed, but I don't feel the symptoms anymore. And is that the same for you, Rebecca? You don't?
In my mind, I don't have it. Like I said to one of my friends, I've got a volunteer staying with me at the moment to help me because of my foot, and he's walking my dogs and what have you, and a guy off the internet. And I said to him, I haven't mentioned MS to you, have I? I said, I'm always moaning about my toe. You hear me go on about my toe day in, day out. But have I mentioned to you multiple sclerosis? He said, no, not once. Because it's not part of my life. It's not in my head. So I don't feel like I have it. And in my last MRI scan, I had no new lesions.
Same here.
Right.
Same here. No evidence of disease.
Yeah.
Only old lesions that are there like scars.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for both of us, they could also go away eventually. I think they could
maybe
get smaller eventually.
But
but if they don't, I don't care.
I don't care either. They don't make a difference. I can't see them. There's no symptoms happening. So what difference does it make? Like, as far as I'm concerned, I would happily just get rid of the MS diagnosis and leave it behind. I feel like it's a neurological event that took away 10 years of my life or derailed my life.
Yeah, same here. So how can people reach you, Rebecca? Because I have it down the bottom of the screen. Did I do it correctly? Is it at Cabana Chronicles?
Yeah, and then my email address is in the channel info.
Okay. So if you want to hear more about Rebecca's story, which is a fascinating story, it's just, the places you've been and the things you've done, all for your health, and just finding that health back. I'm just so happy that happened with you and happened with me as well. It's just, it's such a joyous thing. And to share this story with my listeners, my subscribers, and to let you all know that, yes, eating fatty red meat is healing. We we've got both of us here that have experienced that, and from different parts of the globe. And I just think it's fabulous, and I'm so grateful for you for sharing your story, Rebecca.
Well, likewise, you know, it really is incredible that we're both sitting here saying the same thing. Like, what? That's incredible. We've got to keep sharing this information. If we can
Yeah.
reach anybody else that's out there.
Yes. And you know, if you're listening to this, if you want Rebecca and I to do a live,
Yeah.
I would certainly be willing to do that, and
Yeah.
to have you ask questions about autoimmune disease. We're not doctors. We can't tell you what to do, but we could tell you what helped us. And we can tell you, you know, it's just, you know, it's not like we're prescribing a drug. It's just eating fatty red meat. And it to me, it's unbelievable and amazing. And I'm so grateful that you came on to share your story, Rebecca.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'd love to do a live, 100%.
All right, let's do it. Everyone, thank you for listening, and I shall see you later.